Thank you, everyone that is joining me for tonight's episode for the Dark Night of the Soul. Thank you so much for everyone that's in attendance. I am so appreciative. As you come in the room, uh, please click the like button. That'll really help boost some of my viewership as well as get the good word out and try to spread our little grassroots approach towards this platform and some of the things we're discussing. So, if you can, please do me a big favor, hit that like button on your screen. Let me know you're here. If you're in the room and you don't mind giving a shout out to me, let me know where you are, what part of the country you're viewing in, or a part of the world for that matter. I would greatly appreciate it. I do appreciate you taking an interest in what we're discussing here and what we have been discussing. Thank you so much. I'm going to wait a little while longer to give a couple of more people time to come into this room. And I want you to know your support is not taken for granted by any means. As we discussed last week or week before, tomorrow is not promised. And because of that, I am grateful for every opportunity that I have to come before you and speak with you. And I'm going to give everyone about maybe one more minute before we start into the subject. And apologies for not starting out correctly. To all of my believers, God is everything. Queen Mama, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I do appreciate you. I love you so much. Thank you very, very much, Mama E, or Queen Mother, as we're familiar with. Mama E, I think you're gonna really like this episode. And by the way, if you have not had an opportunity to view any of Mama E's videos from her platform, she has her own platform. Let's talk about it with Mama E, and she is very knowledgeable on regarding the faith of Christianity. She is a practicing believer, no hypocrisy in her whatsoever. She is patient and loving and is more than willing to discuss anything that you would like to discuss regarding the Bible, Christianity, the history of it, what works for her, and her own personal faith journey that she's been embarking on for, I'm not sure how long. I think maybe the last maybe 30 years, Mama E. But we are really we're appreciative to you, Mama E, for everything that you do week in and week out every Sunday at 4 p.m. on YouTube Live. Please check out Jewel Pierce, Queen Mother, aka Mama E. Her platform is a beautiful jewel. Thank you so much, Brother Fat Boy. I do appreciate you coming in and joining us as well. I do not take you all's viewership or attendance for granted. I'm so humbled. Thank you so much. And everyone that's in the room and watching with me right now, say a prayer for me because I am a little bit nervous right now. Not because I'm afraid, but because this information that we're about to cover, it will be, it's going to be heavy. It's not going to be something that requires a lot of thought as much as it's going to require a lot of heart. This is going to be one of those feeling episodes. Now, we're going to go over some things that just have to be understood from the outset, some of the basics. We're going to have to get some definitions in play. We're going to have to get some perspectives in order. But I assure you, after that, this is going to be mainly a heart conversation. And if you feel like you would love to add to this conversation, please, by all means, we have a moderator with us here at Logos Pathos Ethos, and they are actually moderating the room. And if you have any questions, place it in the room, make it to the attention of Logos Pathos Ethos, and the moderator will bring it to my attention, and I'll address your question. I do ask any questions that you may have, please allow that question to be relative to the subject matter we're discussing. If it's a question that is not relevant to the conversation we're having, but it is an important question, by all means, I'll be more than willing to address your question personally. We can speak over the phone. We can speak by way of chat. Hey, my brother Victor, always a pleasure. Always. Any which way you like to communicate, I'll be more than willing and happy to speak with you about it. And that is not to say that I have all the answers or anything by any means. As a matter of fact, especially today, this subject matter is going to require us just to be honest with ourselves. Tonight's episode is titled Dark Night of the Soul. What is the night of the soul? The dark night of the soul is something that I personally experienced. If you have never experienced something called a dark night, the dark night of the soul, it's transformative. It is the most horrifying, scary, frightening, uncertain, isolating, alienating, yet most beneficial, transformative in a positive manner experience you will ever have in your entire life. This is not an experience that everyone has. This is not an experience that you have to have if you, let's just say, you have to have a faith in a deity or a God. That would help tremendously. But everyone can experience a dark night of the soul. Dark night of the soul usually hits you at any given point in time. It can be caused by something, or it could be a process that you're undergoing. The dark night of the soul started out originally in the 16th century by a Spanish mystic by the name of Saint John of the Cross. And at that time, St. John of the Cross basically used the term dark night of the soul to describe a phase, Phase, a phase of spiritual renewal, spiritual growth, specifically spiritual purification. And that's an important word, purification. But during recent years, I would say maybe the last 200 years, the dark night of the soul began to explain or describe a difficult, painful period of one's life. It is often triggered by loss, death, or life-threatening illness. And I apologize. I need to stop for 1 second. I need to recognize my mother. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Joyce Horton. Mama, thank you so much, and happy early Mother's Day to you. We can't wait to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's also really good to have both yourself along with Mama E and Fat Boy in the same room. I would love to hear a conversation between you, Mama, and Mama E. But thank you so much for coming. So the dark night of the soul, as I described, can be a crisis of faith or a difficult, painful period of one's life, often triggered by loss, death, a life-threatening situation, or sometimes it can be triggered by something such as divorce. Now, those were antecedents or reasons for the dark night of the soul to occur, but it can hit you if you are a deep thinking person that critically examines their life and really puts thought into things like, why am I here? What is my purpose? What am I attempting to accomplish with this thing that we've been gifted with called life? And something can come along and trigger you and cause you to question everything in your life. And when I say everything, everything. I'm going to tell you a brief story because I can only speak for me in describing to you what the dark night of the soul feels like. And that's the crazy part. I can't tell you what it is, but I can describe to you how it feels and what happened to me. When I found myself in the midst of my dark night of the soul, I'd accomplished a lot of things in my life. Going to school, grad school, went and lived in other countries. Uh, I had a good job, making good money, lots of experiences, helping people in my profession, which is why I was there to begin with. And I'll never forget the day that I got the call that my father had a very serious terminal illness. He's still with us. Thank you, Lord, for that. And it was when I understood or really began to grapple with the reality that one day, Ron, you're going to be alone. And that frightened me. And when I say alone, I mean this. My father has a terminal illness. I'm watching my mother age, and I have no siblings, no brothers or sisters. I have cousins, friends, family members that are like brothers and sisters, close with my parents, but I felt alone because I realized not if, but when my father passes, not if, when my mother passes, Ron, it's just you. That frightened me. It scared me. I had feelings of pain to know that one day I'm going to have to deal with the absence of these people in my life. A man that I consider a father to me. His name, well, I'll leave his name out of this for anonymity reasons, but a man that practically all, if you will, raised me from the age of 22 years old to this very day. I see that he's getting old, and his wife, whom is a mother to me, is getting old, and their health is not as good as it used to be. And I'm going through these changes trying to figure out what the heck is going on with me. Long story short, I stopped working. I ended up moving back home because I was in a very dysfunctional, unsupportive relationship with my fiance at the time, someone that I was engaged to that I deeply loved or thought I loved at the time. That was a dysfunctional relationship. Lost my job, living back home. And imagine everyone that knows you to be this bright, chipper, funny, smart, intelligent, engaging, outgoing person coming to you saying, "What happened?" At this time, I was at the lowest point of my life. And believe it or not, I was not at the lowest point because of the materialistic things that I lost, such as my own apartment, such as the nice job that I had. That wasn't the issue. The issue that I was dealing with hit more home like, hey man, life as you know it will not radically change. It is radically changing. How are you going to respond to that? Well, like most of us, some of us will delve down deep into things like alcohol, sex, drugs, you name it, I did it, except for the drugs part. That never was me, but that doesn't make me better or worse. I'm just saying that just wasn't my poison. My poison was women and liquor. That's what I did. That was my thing. But what happens when the sex doesn't satisfy? What happens when you keep drinking more and more, trying to get that feeling of consolation, that feeling of everything is going to be okay? Once I have this shot or this drink or what have you, I'll have the answer when I wake up. Well, when I pass out and wake up, guess what? I was still in the same hellish condition. I'm really glad my mother is here, and there's another individual in the room that saw me go through this process. So I have no reason to lie to you. Thank you, Lord, for a witness. And, you know, when you are going through something that serious, that impactful, and you're used to being known as the person with the answers or would find the answers, and you can't find the answers, it messes with your self-esteem. So now, on top of everything that I just named, now I'm dealing with self-esteem issues. I've lost my confidence. I lost my mojo, as they would say back in the 1920s and 30s. Everything that I tried to rely on to help me feel better, give me an answer, I couldn't find my way out of this dark room. I'll be fair about it and honest. I went to church, nothing. Would read my Bible, nothing. There were times where, and my witnesses would tell you, there were times from the time I would wake up until the time I would go to sleep, I would watch different sermons on TV, hoping something would give me an answer to help me feel better. I even looked up something called the Dark Night of the Soul, which is what I'm bringing to you right now, to try to find something to explain what I am going through. Nothing. When I looked up the Dark Night of the Soul, they gave all of these different explanations. Your third eye isn't open, or you're dealing with past trauma, or you have to check your vibrations. And I'm not discrediting any of that. What I am saying, it didn't work for me. Now, that is how it feels, or at least it felt to me. Tonight, we're going to do something a little bit different. And I'm going to ask you to please be patient with me. Please be patient with me and follow me, because I'm going somewhere. And you all know, usually when I say I'm going somewhere, I mean, we're driving and I'm hitting a hard left turn, and we going real hard in this left turn. Your seatbelt is on, and then I'm going to take another turn. And you're like, where the hell is this man going? And then by the time, if you're patient enough to remain a passenger, you'll see that in the end, I'm making all the sense in the world. And I'm not going to sneak up on you. I'm going to show you and tell you where we're going ahead of time. The only thing I'm requiring of you is two things. Follow me. Number two, I need you to think on two levels simultaneously. If you're not used to doing that tonight, we're gonna have an exercise of thinking on two different levels simultaneously, because they're related. On one level, I need you to remember everything that I just described. If you've experienced a dark night of the soul, I want you to reflect on your own experience. Let that be one level of thinking. The second level of thinking that we're going to think about or utilize during this talk while we're reflecting on how we felt, here comes the turn. The second thing we're going to talk about, the beauty of butterflies. I know some of you took a breath just now, so I'm gonna let you get yourself together. And I'm not losing my mind. Everything that I bring to you is related, relevant, and important. I'm not saying these things just to say something that sounds good. I'm saying these things because I've experienced it and I saw the truth and beauty of it. Feelings, the dark night of the soul, simultaneously thinking about the beauty of butterflies. So let's talk about butterflies. Butterflies didn't get here as a baby butterfly. The butterfly got here through a process called metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a biological process by which an animal physically develops, which includes birth transformation involving an abrupt change in the animal's body structure. Usually, when there's an abrupt change in an animal's body structure, a significant alteration of their diet changes. So, in other words, as the animal begins to change, what fed it as a baby in its infant stage is no longer sufficient to feed it based on what it has now become through the process of metamorphosis. Metamorphosis can be described in one of two ways. The first one is direct development. So you have two forms of metamorphosis, and all metamorphosis is a change in the animal's body structure. There are two forms of that process. The first one is direct development, defined as where there is little difference between the larval or larva and adult form. Insects that undergo direct development do not go through a transformation. They just go through a process of maturation. In other words, we're here in Texas. Have you seen on the back of your trees during the summertime or maybe the springtime? You'll see these exoskeletons of grasshoppers, sometimes in the trees or in the grass, and you step on them and they go crunch. Or you'll see a snake shed its exoskeleton. That's because the snake, the grasshopper, it has matured from a baby snake, baby grasshopper, to an adult snake, adult grasshopper. But the skin that surrounded the baby snake and grasshopper is no longer sufficient to contain the body of that organism because it's getting bigger, longer, stronger, and it needs something else to help protect it. So it sheds the old skin so that the new skin, the new body of the insect, the new animal of the reptile can come forward. So, in other words, when you look at that snake, you see a baby snake. When you look at that same snake after shedding its exoskeleton, you now see an adult shape that shed its own skin. But it still looks the same. That is called direct development. The second form of metamorphosis, which is where most of our conversation is going to take place, is something called, I'm sorry, total complete change, meaning the form of change that occurs during total complete change or metamorphosis is so radical that the immature stages that it begins as looks nothing like the stage that it ends up as. I'll give you an example. Butterflies start out as something called a larva. They look like a little, if you want to know what a larva is, think of a maggot. Whenever you leave the garbage out and they said, hey man, don't throw the chicken bones, the raw chicken, just in the garbage, or chicken, what with the casing that it came in, anything like that, because you come back the next day and you see flies everywhere. You come back the day after that and there are worm or maggots everywhere and they look horrible. And then you have to kill all these maggots or what have you. That's where the butterfly starts. Total change, complete change is this. Immature stages are called larvae and differ significantly than themselves as adults. Insects which undergoes successive stages and emerges as adults. An example of that could be the butterfly. Butterflies have dated about 56 million to about 100 million years old, according to the fossil record. Butterflies develop in 4 successive stages. Now, let me stop for 1 second and let's kind of get caught up on where we were, because I know some of us in here came late. I requested that you think on 2 levels. 1, what happened to you if you went through a dark night of the soul experience? And number 2, the beauty of butterflies. And here we are regarding the beauty of butterflies. But you're going to have to think simultaneously in order to understand what happened to you if you've experienced a dark night of the soul. Caterpillars go through 4 stages. The first one is the larva. And that's where they look like the little maggots. That's all it looks like. But then it starts to develop into something called a caterpillar. Everyone has seen a caterpillar. Caterpillars have a whole lot of different legs. They're kind of cute. They feed on leaves, harmless things you could ever see. Cute. Sometimes they're different colors. Sometimes they're all black. You can see them running across the street on a hot summer day here in Texas, and you can see them moving too. That cement is hot. And they started out as a larva, or a maggot, if you will, just for the sake of argument. Let's just say a maggot. They started out as that, and now they're this caterpillar. Then from the caterpillar, they change into something called a pupa or a chrysalis. Have you ever seen a cocoon? That is the chrysalis stage that the butterfly goes through. It started out as a maggot. It evolved and grew and changed into a caterpillar. Welcome, family from Dallas. Thank you for attending. Started out as the maggot, made its way to the caterpillar. We're familiar with both of them. And we've also seen the cocoon. The cocoon or chrysalis stage is the stage where the insect is enclosed in a cocoon. This stage is also called the emergence stage, meaning after whatever is inside of the cocoon has developed to a point where it is ready to come out of that cocoon, it is called the emergence stage. And what causes the caterpillar to exit the cocoon is when the hormones are released from within the caterpillar to signify that whatever I am now in this cocoon, the cocoon is no longer sufficient to act as my protector. It is no longer sufficient to act as my new home, if you will. The cocoon is actually made from the very hairs of the caterpillar, and it spins it and weaves it and incorporates the hairs of its body that it sheds into the cocoon to build its home. Isn't that beautiful? Everything that the cocoon needed was in the caterpillar. Everything that the caterpillar needed to become a caterpillar was in the larva or maggot. Their time inside of the cocoon can last sometimes days, no, actually weeks, sometimes months. And believe it or not, thank you so much, Leah Austin, as well. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you, family. Um, the cocoon, the organism inside the cocoon can stay in there even years. That is correct. Years, as little as weeks, as many as years. And it's contingent on not only the hormones within the organism inside of the caterpillar that's in the cocoon, but it's also contingent upon whether or not, if I come out or not, what the environment is dictating in terms of the proper time to come out. Because sometimes you can do the right thing at the wrong time and get the result you weren't looking for. As a side note, just something one to grow on, no pun intended. Something interesting about butterflies. Leah Austin, you would definitely love this episode. Butterflies are sexually dimorphic, whereas males differ from females such as size, weight, color, and temperament. And one of the things that, if you can think of a butterfly in this fashion, one of the things that a butterfly, what differentiates a male butterfly from a female butterfly is its level of aggressiveness. But it isn't aggressive because it just wants to go out and conquer. It's aggressive because it has to compete with other males for the right to have intercourse and spread their genes and make other baby maggots, baby larvae, keep their DNA going. Side note. We to this day do not know what the process within the cocoon looks like. We've used 3D imaging, but we get glimpses at best because what we do know is inside of the cocoon, the larvae that changed into the caterpillar that went into the cocoon is now surrounded by a lot of different liquids that it now has begun to dissolve, if you will. And part of it is still the caterpillar, if you will, or whatever it's changing into. And it's protected by that fluid that it's encapsulated in, like children are within the amniotic fluid of their mother's stomach when they're in the sac. Think of the caterpillar, or rather what used to be the caterpillar, inside of this goo within this cocoon. Once all of the conditions have been met, a miracle happens. Slowly, something, thank you so much, Miss Smith, for joining us. So much that when it is time for the organism, the insect, to exit the cocoon, its hormones and the environment are in agreement. It is time and safe to leave and exit the premises. What comes out of the cocoon is what you and I know of as the butterfly. The butterfly, when it comes out of the cocoon, it doesn't fly immediately. Its wings are wet because, as we stated earlier, within the cocoon, there's a fluid, a liquid within there that the butterfly resides within. When it comes out, it has to wait until its wings are ready. Once its wings are dry, what the caterpillar considered the end, the butterfly considered the beginning. It has wings, antennae, a couple of sets of legs, if you will, if you want to call them that. It has different colors. It looks nothing like what went into the cocoon. I asked you to think on two levels. One, if you've ever experienced a dark night of the soul. Two, the beauty of butterflies. When it happened to me, I didn't know what happened. I had no idea. I had no idea whatsoever. When I began to change, your first inclination would have been, this individual here is succumbing to some form of depression. But that would, if you're going through this process in real time, it's similar to depression, but it doesn't feel like depression. Let me make sure that you all understand the distinction before I go further. One of the reasons that I stated that could be possibly responsible for the dark night of the soul is, let's just say, divorce. If, let's say, you're madly in love with your spouse and your spouse one day wakes up and says, I don't ever want to see you ever again. I'm in love with another individual, and they run off. Depending on where you are in your stage, at that stage in your life, that can be very, very traumatic. Good evening, T. Marie. Thank you so much for joining us. That can be very, very dramatic. She is always here supporting us as well. Thank you so much. That process can be very traumatic. It can be very scary, frightening, uncertain. But where this differs from depression is this. Let's say that same spouse came back the next day and said, you know what? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We can be back together. And here's some things that I want to change. And there's some things you want to change. And let's live happily ever after. Your depression would be gone overnight. Let's say you lose your job, or your spouse or significant other lose their job. You have children, you have a mortgage, a car note, those kind of normal things. You're stressed, you're worried. Let's say it lasts for an extended period of time, you get depressed, which is normal, by the way. Well, you would be really down, probably suicidal in some cases, uncertain of your future, uncertain of your children's future. Now you're not only worried about yourself, you're worried about your children. People are concerned about you. You're getting the calls. You're on the prayer warriors list at church. But then something else happens. You hit the lottery. Depression gone. With the dark night of the soul, It's not about anyone or anything outside of you. My spouse coming back to me after having left me would not change any process that I would have to undergo in terms of the dark night of the soul. You could give me $1 billion, and if I am in the midst of the dark night of the soul, at best, I'll get some type of temporary relief to see that I can help people that may need assistance financially. So that would give me some form, a little bit of consolation. That would buy me some time. But guess what? After everything that I named before, the sex, the drugs, the women, in your case, if you're a female, the men, whatever the case may be, all of those things that gave you temporary relief will be right back. The only difference is you just be going through the dark night of the soul with $500 million, which I know some of you are thinking that would make it easier. No, it wouldn't. I'm here to tell you it wouldn't, because I went through it. So that's how the dark night of the soul and the depression differs. Because dark night of the soul, everything that you took for granted, that you understood about yourself, as I told you before, I used to be an alcoholic. I lost my job. I lost my fiance at the time. Thank you, Lord. God works. He's real. But I lost. I was a pathetic man, and I have no problem with saying that, because I was stripped of every single thing that I formerly prided myself on. No longer was of service to me. Now, the way that this experience relates to butterflies and metamorphosis is this. Let's talk about what it is not first. Do you remember when I told you at the beginning of this talk that there's something called direct development or direct change, which means you just go from a baby snake to a big snake, from a baby grasshopper to a big grasshopper, and all you shed is basically your exoskeleton? Same thing. There are people in your life that you've known probably since they were born. And from the time they were born until now, this young man may be 21 years of age. You can see that there's been a growth and development in process. They're taller, they're probably more handsome, or they're prettier. They're probably developed in terms of their anatomical features of their body. Their voice is deepened, or gained an octave, whatever the case may be. But you still know that person at 21 because they look still similar to the person they were at 8 months old. And you watch them grow from a baby to an adult, and that's a beautiful thing to witness, by the way. But that's similar to direct development. Psychologically, you can have a person that is 21 years of age, but mentally 13. Direct development. What happened, as we say in the hood, what happened was the body grew, but the mind, its development was arrested at 13 years of age. So that's where they get the whole story of Peter Pan, the boy that would not grow up. They may have the body of an adult, but they act like a child. They think like a child. They may have the strength of a grown man, but they have the temperament of a 15-year-old. They may have the body of a grown woman, but they throw temper tantrums as if they were 9 years old. They're just able to do it on a larger scale. So in other words, you never grew up. Your body did, but you didn't mentally. That's very similar to direct development. in terms of how it plays out psychologically and biologically within us. Now, let's talk about complete change, complete metamorphosis. It's described as an extraordinary change in appearance, character, circumstance. Metamorphosis can describe what happens when people of faith embrace the deepest meanings of their lives. You may even witness during your metamorphosis abrupt changes in your belief systems. The knowledge that you possessed previously of how the world works, what works, how it works, when it works, where it works, has been radically transformed. Your values may have undergone significant transformation. What does that look like? There are people that I have met in my life. There are people that you have met in your life. That when you met them, you said, "Oh my goodness, you have changed. You have evolved." I'm looking at this person that I knew when they were 21 years old. Last time I met you, you were strung out on drugs and cocaine and women and just out there just running rapid. And now you can come back to them 10 years later, and let's just say you are now meeting a Buddhist priest. They don't eat meat any longer. They have a sanctity and value for all life. Where once they would abuse their bodies, now they only feed it and incorporate things that can help it grow and thrive, that will give it nourishment. You have a radical change in this person's thinking, so much that their physical representation is reflective of the inner change that has occurred. And that is when you start scaring people, because they will not know how to relate to you. I understand, I get it. Because the way that I used to engage you and relate to you is no longer sufficient to connect with you any more than the butterfly would choose to go back into the cocoon and attempt to become a caterpillar again. It doesn't serve it. My question is, have you changed? Have you changed? Have you really changed? Have you ever undergone a dark night of the soul? It is the most transformative experience you will ever have in your life. If you have never experienced this, consider this to be a roadmap to show, hey, there's a curve coming up here. But there's nothing we can do or say to you that can lessen the impact. There's nothing we can do or say to you that will thwart your engagement into the dark night of the soul. There's nothing whatsoever that we can do to influence the passing of this experience in your personal life. And when it hits you, you know it. You know it. I know this is some rough subject matter that I'm going over right now, but this is real. If you have not experienced this, heed it as a warning, but a beautiful warning, nothing to be feared, because on the other side, I promise you, it's worth the pain of the transformation. You will not go back to being a maggot. You cannot go back to being a caterpillar. I don't care how many times you hide in your mother's home. I stayed in my bedroom in my cocoon, and my mother is my witness for 2 years straight. I call it self-incarceration. No one heard from me for 2 years. I had no answers for anyone regarding what I was going through. But when you come out of that cocoon and the transformation has occurred in your life, you're going to eat differently. You're going to be very selective on what you give your time to. You're going to become much more humble. You're going to seek peace with all men. This may sound strange, but my favorite passage of the Bible is when I was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child. But then when I became a man, I put away childish things. Don't be afraid of the process. Be aware of the process. Don't fight it, because all you're doing is you're fighting who you already are. You're just in the process of becoming it. I hope that we're for 50 minutes. We've taken a little bit more time than we expected. I do appreciate the time that you all have given me regarding this subject matter. This was a topic about 4 years in the making, and I had no idea that we were going to be discussing the beauty of transformation. But it was worth the wait. It was worth the caterpillar. It was worth the cocoon. And I would never trade being a butterfly for anything else in this life. Thank you all for the time you've given me. God bless you. To all believers, God is everything, or he is nothing. Have a good night.